This was supposed to be a revamp of my original Sonic 3 review, where I would go back and look at the game and find more details that I may have missed previously, but as it stands, I will be completely overhauling this review and delving into the review of not only Sonic 3, but both Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. So with that said, this is Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the Sega Mega Drive. Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were released simultaneously in 1994. The reason for this was due to time constraints and cost of cartridges, forcing the developers to split them into two different games. Think of it as the cartridge equivalent of having multiple discs for single games such as Metal Gear Solid or Final Fantasy VII. However, Sonic & Knuckles was created a little differently than any typical Sega Mega Drive game. The cartridge of Sonic & Knuckles featured what was known as lock-on technology. This allowed a Sonic 3 cartridge to attach itself to the top of the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge, creating the combined, full, true game known as Sonic 3 and Knuckles. As a side note, if Sonic 2 was attached to Sonic & Knuckles, we would get Knuckles the Echidna, a standalone game where the player would exclusively play as Knuckles in the world of Sonic 2. But I will not be making a review of that, however, as I've already covered Sonic 2 and I will be covering Knuckles in this review. The story follows that of Sonic 2, and we learn that the Death Egg introduced in the previous game's story has crash-landed onto a floating island known as Angel Island. We then see Sonic speed his way onto the island on his own as Super Sonic until he collides with Knuckles. Sonic drops all of his emeralds as a result, and Knuckles steals them all and runs off. And throughout this game, Sonic will occasionally run into Knuckles as he finds many ways to halt his progress of reobtaining the emeralds and stopping Robotnik. We take control of Sonic after Knuckles steals these emeralds, and almost all of Sonic's initial abilities remain in this installment. There is one extra ability that Sonic has in this game, and it is known as the Insta Shield. Personally, I found this ability to be a bit awkward to pull off, but if done correctly, a temporary shield will surround Sonic for a fraction of a second, allowing you to kill enemies within its range without touching them. Apparently it's more useful when attacking more defensive enemies, but I personally haven't been able to achieve this very well. It's awkward, but I've seen other players use it successfully, so to my understanding it does work. As with Sonic 2, you can play Sonic 3 with Tails as a drop-in second player. This time, Tails has a little more usefulness as opposed to Sonic 2, though not by much. Tails now has the ability to fly on player command and can also lift Sonic to higher areas. This is temporary though, as Tails' speed will drop and will also lower himself in altitude due to the weight of carrying Sonic. This is complemented by the fact that every level in this game is almost 3 times larger than the previous game, with higher levels of verticality than what was ever in Sonic 2. This ends up being a double-edged sword for me personally though. On one hand, I can appreciate the game giving me more areas to explore and hidden places to find, but at the same time, I found some of the levels very maze-like in structure, especially Carnival Night Zone, which is meant to be the third take on a similar theme to that of Spring Hill Zone from Sonic 1 and Casino Zone from Sonic 2. While Casino Zone was my favourite stage in Sonic 2, Carnival Night Zone is my least favourite stage in Sonic 3. It is the most drawn out, longest, most confusing zone out of all the zones in the entire game, and it took me multiple attempts to complete it. Thankfully, with the help of save states, I was able to manage on the Steam version of this game, so I couldn't imagine trying this at a younger age. I'd be frustrated, I'd end up hating this game, but I digress. Since most of the levels have such verticality, there is very little room for speed as a result. I associate Sonic the Hedgehog with mad speed and platforming being the secondary mechanic of the game. But here in Sonic 3 it seems to be reversed, as platforming is a big deal in this game and speed is only there a few times. It personally disappointed me, as I always associated this kind of platforming with the likes of Super Mario Bros, which is a game I actually thought was too hard at the time. There are now 2 types of special stages in this game. The first type is achieved if the player has passed a checkpoint, just like in Sonic 2. This special stage does not contain a Chaos Emerald as a reward though. In order to trigger the other special stage, you have to find a secret passage hidden in levels which contain a giant ring. Once you jump into this ring, you are warped into a 3D map surrounded by blue and red spheres, as well as other obstacles such as bounce pads and jump pads. The objective of this special stage is to run through every blue sphere that's in the stage. Doing that will reward the player with a Chaos Emerald, 1 of 7 yet again. Collecting all 7 of the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 3 will once again reward the player with the ability to play as Super Sonic, and the same abilities apply here. A competitive 2-player mode was once again added to this installment. It comprises of 2 players controlling either Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, racing through up to 5 original stages, and the objective is to run through the stages in a lap time attack format. The fastest player wins. It's not my favourite 2-player mode, and I found Sonic 2's competitive mode to be a lot better. Once the player finishes the Sonic 3 storyline portion of the game, if you have Sonic and Knuckles included, you will go straight into that game from the end of Sonic 3. The gameplay remains the exact same with a couple of exemptions. So let's decipher the difference between both games. If you play Sonic 3 on its own, you get to play that game with the ability to play as Sonic, Tails, or with both. Also included in this game is the ability to save your progress to the cartridge. With a game with levels as large as this, it's almost a necessity to have, and much welcome too. If you play Sonic and Knuckles on its own, 2-player mode is completely stripped. You cannot play as Tails. Instead, you have the choice of playing either as Sonic or Knuckles. Each character will have different events and routes to take. Knuckles' special ability allows him to latch onto walls and climb up or down them. He can also run through walls that Sonic would otherwise not be able to spin dash through. The story of Sonic and Knuckles is kind of a confusing one. At least it was when I first looked it up. If you choose to play as Sonic, you will continue right where Sonic 3 left off. And if you chose to play as Knuckles, you are chronologically behind Sonic and you run through most of the same levels. It's a bit confusing story-wise, but who is playing a Sonic game for the story anyway? To be honest, I don't even know why I include it in my reviews. But I digress once again. With Sonic 3 and Knuckles, there is more than just 2 halves joined together. You get access to the save feature even through the Sonic and Knuckles chapter, as well as the ability to play as Knuckles throughout the Sonic 3 chapter, who wasn't available on its own. You also get to earn 14 emeralds in total, which is 7 Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 3, and in Sonic and Knuckles you have to collect 7 Super Emeralds. Collecting all the emeralds will reward the player with the ability to play as Hyper Sonic. This is regarded as the most powerful form Sonic has ever had in any installment. Each of the 3 characters will also have this ability should you have chosen to play as any of them. What I failed to mention in Sonic 2 was that there are 2 acts to a stage instead of 3 that was in Sonic 1, and Sonic 3 maintains this. Added to this game was the inclusion of a sub-boss, a mini-boss that you would encounter at the end of Act 1. And instead of the typical 8 hits that would destroy Dr. Robotnik, these bosses only take 5 and are much easier to defeat in comparison. This is also the first Sonic game to have all the stages to be interconnected with each other. There is no fade to black in between stages, and I personally thought it was a nice touch. It maintains continuity as a result. In terms of graphics, I found the visuals in some of the stages to be a bit of a mess. I found Angel Island Zone particularly to be very loud in its visual style. Other than that, the game does look okay. It doesn't seem to be a massive jump in graphics from Sonic 2. It does look good, but personally I thought some of the levels, especially Angel Island Zone, like I just mentioned, was a bit of a mess to look at. As far as I'm concerned, I don't find Sonic 3 entirely aesthetically pleasing as I did with Sonic 2, but that's just my opinion. Each to their own, I suppose. While it's not personally my favourite from a gameplay standpoint, I will say it's the biggest with the most content. If you want to experience Sonic 3 at its fullest, you absolutely have to have both Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles to get the full experience. It is an epic package that has plenty to offer, and it's certainly sealed off a perfect trilogy of games. And that concludes my trilogy of Sonic the Hedgehog for the Mega Drive. Thanks for watching this review. This has been Gamerboy talking here, talking to you on Gamerboy Gaming, where I play the games that you need to have. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheerio.